The bullet meant for a little girl found Garrett Callahan instead. And in those 3 seconds between impact and collapse, a warehouse worker became something the world rarely sees anymore. A real hero. But this isn't a story about heroes. This is a story about a father who lost everything and was about to find what he never dared to dream. The Saturday morning began like every other Saturday for the past 3 years. Garrett Callahan woke at 6, or brewed instant coffee because the good stuff cost too much, and checked his bank account on a phone with a cracked screen. $247 stared back at him. Rent was due in 3 days. $600 he didn't have. He closed the app and pretended he hadn't seen the number. At 35 years old, Garrett had become an expert at pretending. He pretended the water stains spreading across the ceiling didn't bother him. He pretended the mildew smell creeping from the bathroom was perfectly normal. He pretended that working the night shift at Morrison Logistics while his 8-year-old son slept alone was fine, acceptable, what any good father would do. He pretended he wasn't drowning. The apartment at 42B Riverside was small. 2 bedrooms that were really 1 bedroom, and a closet with a window. South District wasn't dangerous exactly, but it wasn't safe either. It was the kind of neighborhood where people kept their eyes down and their doors locked, where everyone had problems too heavy to carry anyone else's burden. Garrett pulled on his faded Baltimore Orioles cap, the one Elaine had bought him on their honeymoon, back when they'd had money for honeymoons, and grabbed his keys. The Honda Civic in the parking lot was 17 years old, rusted around the wheel wells, and sounded like an old man with emphysema every time the engine turned over. But it ran, most days. Weston was already awake when Garrett knocked on his bedroom door, bouncing on the bed with the kind of energy that only 8-year-olds possess before 7 in the morning. "Dad, can we get pizza tonight?" The question hit Garrett like it always did. That familiar squeeze of love and guilt that came whenever his son asked for something simple, something normal, something that other kids took for granted. "We'll see, buddy. Money's tight until payday." But Weston's face didn't fall. That was the remarkable thing about his boy. He never complained, never pushed, never made Garrett feel worse than he already felt. He just nodded with that gap-toothed grin that showed exactly where his 2 front teeth were growing and crooked. "I'm always good," Weston declared, grabbing his backpack. "That's my boy." They drove to Mrs. Patterson's house in comfortable silence, Weston chattering about his science project, electromagnets and how they were in everything, cars and computers and doorbells. His teacher had said it was impressive for 3rd grade. Garrett had helped where he could, but mostly he'd just watched his son work, marveling at the focus and curiosity that reminded him so painfully of Elaine. Elaine, who had been an elementary school teacher. Elaine, who had believed every child could learn if someone just believed in them first. Elaine, who had gotten sick when Weston was 5 and had fought for 18 months before the cancer finally won. 3 years. It had been 3 years since she'd squeezed his hand for the last time, since she'd whispered, "Take care of our boy," and closed her eyes forever. 3 years since Garrett's world had collapsed into medical bills and grief, and the desperate daily scramble to keep his son fed and housed and believing that life was still good. He'd been somebody once. Staff Sergeant Garrett Callahan, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. 3 tours in Afghanistan protecting diplomats and generals, making split-second decisions that meant life or death. He'd been respected, valued, somebody. Now he was a warehouse worker making $14.
You could have run like everyone else.
Why did you rush in? Rush in.
Because she was alone, and because I couldn't stand idly by.
And 50 cents an hour, and he couldn't even afford pizza for his kid. "Be good for Mrs. Patterson," he said as Weston climbed out of the Honda. "I'm always good." Garrett watched until his son disappeared through the front door, waving enthusiastically through the window, that crooked smile still lighting up his face. The tightness in Garrett's chest didn't ease. It never did anymore. He had errands to run, groceries, new shoes for Weston. The kid was growing like a weed, already wearing through his 3rd pair this year. Maybe a small toy if anything remained in the budget, which it wouldn't. The Honda coughed its way toward Grandview Mall. Grandview Mall rose like a monument to middle-class aspirations, all gleaming glass and polished marble. The October sun reflected off its facades, and the parking lot was already filling with weekend shoppers hunting for sales and distractions. Garrett parked in the free section, 15 minutes of walking from the entrance. But free was free. He made his way through the familiar maze of stores, past jewelry displays and phone kiosks, and clothing boutiques with mannequins wearing outfits that cost more than his monthly rent. The shoe store had a sale, 40% off. He found sneakers for Weston at $29.99 and felt a small surge of triumph. His son would have new shoes without holes, and Garrett would still have enough for groceries. Small victories. That's what life had become, a string of small victories that almost added up to survival. He was cutting through the food court when he saw her. The little girl stood near the fountain, completely still amid the Saturday chaos. 7 years old, maybe. Yellow dress with white daisies embroidered along the hem. Expensive fabric, careful stitching. Blonde hair pulled into 2 perfect pigtails tied with matching ribbons. She held an ice cream cone, strawberry and vanilla swirled together, pink drops falling onto her small hands as it melted. Her blue eyes watched the fountain's dancing water with the pure wonder that only children possessed. Something made Garrett slow his pace. Maybe it was how she stood so still, like a tiny island of innocence in a sea of rushing adults. Maybe she reminded him of Weston at that age, before life had taught them both that ice cream cones were luxuries to be savored, not expected. Or maybe on some level he couldn't explain. His soldier's instincts recognized danger before his conscious mind caught up. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder from a clear sky. For one heartbeat, the entire mall froze. That impossible moment when the human brain struggles to reconcile violence with the mundane safety of Saturday shopping. Someone dropped a tray of food. The clatter echoed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. Then came the second shot, and hell descended on Grandview Mall. Screams erupted everywhere. The crowd transformed into a panicked mass. Bodies colliding, stumbling, trampling. Parents scooped up children. Teenagers abandoned phones and ran. The elderly pressed against storefronts with terror-white faces. Garrett's military training exploded back to life. 3 years of civilian existence burned away in an instant. His eyes swept the scene in practiced arcs. Exits, cover positions, threats. His body moved before his conscious mind formed thoughts, muscles remembering what his brain had tried to forget. The shooter emerged from behind the information kiosk. Young man, mid-20s. Black hoodie pulled up, modified Glock trembling in unsteady hands. His movements were erratic, jerky, drugs or mental breakdown or both. Amateur, unpredictable. Dangerous precisely because he was unpredictable. But Garrett wasn't watching the shooter anymore. The little girl in yellow stood exactly where she'd been, ice cream still in hand. The panicked crowd had parted around her like water around stone, leaving her completely exposed in the middle of the food court. Alone. Her blue eyes were wide with confusion. Not fear, not yet. She didn't understand why everyone was running, why the loud noises kept coming, why the adults who should protect her had all vanished. The shooter turned.
I've built walls so high I've forgotten how to lean on anyone. Me too.
For years, I've just been holding on.
His weapon swung in a wild arc toward the girl. Garrett didn't think. Thinking would have killed them both. His body launched forward with remembered precision. The shopping bag flew from his hand. His worn work boots pounded across polished marble. 20 feet, 15, 10. The shooter's finger tightened on the trigger. Garrett dove. His body slammed into the little girl as the gun fired. The bullet meant for a 7-year-old's heart tore through Garrett's left bicep instead. The impact spun him, sent white-hot agony screaming through every nerve, but his arms had already wrapped around her. They crashed to the floor together. Garrett twisted mid-fall, taking the impact on his shoulder, cradling her small body against his chest. The ice cream cone exploded against marble. Strawberry and vanilla spread across the floor like a grotesque parody of blood. But it wasn't her blood. That was all that mattered. "Stay down," Garrett whispered into her ear, though she hadn't made a sound. Shock. He recognized it from combat zones, that eerie silence before screams or shutdown. "I've got you, sweetheart. Stay really still. like we're playing statue. More gunshots echoed through the mall, but farther away now. The shooter was moving deeper into the crowd. Garrett pressed the girl beneath him, making his body a shield. His arms screamed with every heartbeat, blood soaking through his flannel shirt.